we got to figure out how to ease up a little bit.
I'm already there. I'm waiting for you guys to
I'm
meet
pretty
me
close. I'm pretty close. We just got to get Brett there.
It's not going to happen.
The last thing we're going to kind of discuss today is going to be misconceptions about our industry and things that we kind of hear often from people that we want to just kind of squash, right? Put some rest to. Number one, products. Are all products the same? Like you see all these different brands out there. You've got your Logitech and your Yealink and your, Tandberg and your Cisco and your, you've got all these different brands. Neat Bar. We've all heard of all the brands out there if we haven't installed them ourselves. But what makes them? Are they all the same? What makes them different? What makes the difference between QSC or Crestron and so on? That you hear all these names.
They're not all the same. I mean, some of it comes back to how you can manage devices. We've talked about that before.
Yeah.
They don't all have management the same way. They don't all make that easy.
Yeah.
They don't all have the same costs behind management.
That's a good point.
They're not all exactly the same. They do often have similar capabilities, but they sometimes go about them a little differently. So, for instance, one of the manufacturers, they do a lot of their communication using the network for their devices.
Mm-hmm.
But another one of the companies may do their communication over USB.
Mm-hmm.
And so your wiring is different, whether or not you need to jump on a local switch or one of the customer switches. That changes some of that factor as well.
Yeah.
And then there's also different tiers. An entry level from one brand may not quite do what you're trying to do. It's not going to have all the same features. It's not going to have the same quality of speakers, or so your sound's going to be muddy in the room.
You might be limited by the microphone. You have to use their microphones.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Some of them are ecosystem plays where, like you're saying, you have to use all of their parts for it to work ideally.
Yeah, if you were a government contractor, for example, we might steer you different on a different product than if you were somebody who didn't care as much about it.
Yeah.
You can save a few bucks one way, but the other way needs to be a compliant US branded company maybe. There's definitely solutions that we all know out there that are more sophisticated, but it also means that you oftentimes have to have a technician on site to do service as opposed to doing it remotely.
And some of our designs also are for expandability. So if you come into our experience center at Profound Technologies, you'll see a lot of the pre-engineered solutions, which would be Logitech, which would be Neat, which would be HP Poly. But then you might have a customer who says, I want some of those basic features, a single camera, maybe two, speakers, microphones, dual display, but I want to maybe do something else in the future. And that could be expanding to more displays, routing things throughout the facility. You might be asking yourself, well, why would I want to route things throughout the facility? The certain government agencies, but then also like academic environments where you want to be able to send a signal to other places.
Want to stream over YouTube.
Exactly. So that, a couple of those examples might necessarily mean that we're talking QSC. We're going to do a QSys system with those users. Why? Because that's a platform that has a lot of versatility. They can take those signals and send them everywhere. And that's going to come at a cost. That cost we've actually measured. It's probably about 30% more. But certain organizations are like, that's great.
No problem.
No problem. Because I want that. So it's how they differ at times.
Yeah, I mean, the age-old adage where sometimes if you spend more, you can do more ultimately, right? The cookie cutter solutions are going to limit you. But it's going to do it really well every single time, right? If you want to be able to do more, you've got to open up the box, and sometimes that comes at a different cost. But you can do anything you want to do with it then, right? So there's a lot of those types of value items for sure. Okay, so the next question that we often get that's a misconception within the industry is this difference between large companies and small companies, right? And I don't really even see us as a small company. I think we try to be a small company because we know that that's what benefits our customers as much as possible. But we're not small by any means. But we're not a large company, right? There are some really big conglomerates out there that have, dozens and dozens of offices throughout the United States, thousands of employees, kind of a thing. And they're tempting for people to go with, right? And we hear, you would automatically think that must be a better solution. So what's the thoughts, Kevin?
So yes, we don't often compete against the largest companies. We might see them, throughout the year, less than 10% of the time, actually. But on some of our big customers that we go after, they're often there because they're trying to win those enterprise customers that we serve. And so I think the misconception a lot of times is that, maybe their buying power, which is represented in some more competitive pricing on the hardware side, is so, stunning, so tempting, so unavoidable that they want to go with it, because I'll couple that with the fact that they're so big, it can only ever work out. But I think that what we've learned is that that's not true. A lot of the time these large companies really operate as a tapestry, of a bunch of company stores, that have been just rolled up over the years. So while they might have some buying power, which is just legitimate for any kind of economy of scale, like Walmart, the Walmart effect, that's about it. And so what they're able to do, and this goes back to when we were sitting here before, we were talking about bids, which we generally don't participate in, so we don't end up in that situation, is that these large companies are able to compete more on price, but then they usually lackluster when it comes to service and support. And one of the things I know with Profound, and I invite anybody in the audience that's considering using Profound to ask to talk to some of our customers. And what they love is this idea that our teams are just so completely capable. It's this idea of just drop Profound behind enemy lines and they're just going to figure that stuff out. And I think that that's something that a lot of times with the larger companies is not there. Why? Because a lot of those companies lost that inspiration, lost that feel a long time ago, and those people left because those people that were up until that point industry veterans, lovers of the craft, they got bored with the, corporate one-size-fits-all homogenized feel of those organizations. So I think a counterpoint to people considering, Profound versus large organizations is just think about, how that's going to work for you over time. Because it's one thing to be able to bring the proposal to your, procurement person and tell them, listen, I saved, 10 cents off a length of wire. You know what I mean? And this company's 10% less than Profound Technologies, but then you got to live with that, and that goes back to the total cost of ownership. And I think that's where Profound really excels.
Yeah, I can tell countless stories of customers who have either come from that and experienced those horror stories, or even in the midst of it all tried it. I had a company not long ago that we had done a couple of installs for. It was a location that we had to travel to, so there was a travel expense involved in it. And they decided to try the other company because the other company probably could save them an extra $500 in travel on the job, which was very minimal. And they came crawling back with their tail between their legs and said multiple times, "We are so sorry. And you guys have done an amazing job, and we want to tear everything out that the other guys did and have you redo it for us." And they ended up spending twice as much money on that job at that time because the other company installed it and it just never worked right? They don't get the attention to detail. They don't get the questions. They don't, like you said, it's actually a regular conversation that we have about keeping employees, right? It's not an easy thing to keep employees, but it means a lot to our customers that when they pick up the phone and they say, they know exactly who's going to be coming out to service their system, right? They know the person's face. They have a relationship with them. They can ask them a technical question, get support really quickly, and they know their confidence. They believe in them. The last item we're going to discuss today is about consumer versus commercial grade products, right? And we see them all the time. I can't tell you how many times I've had customers who went and bought like a cheap HDMI splitter off of Amazon for $29.99, or picked up the HDMI transmitter so they could transmit from their, from their conference room table to their TV, or better yet, Apple TV, and everyone's trying to AirPlay to the Apple TV, or even something like commercial television versus residential style television, right? What are some of the pitfalls of doing consumer grade products versus commercial grade products, and why is it so important for the types of solutions that we pipe on a daily basis? I'm going to jump to Brett on this one.
Yeah, I mean, some consumer products are made with the costs in mind and not for long-term reliability. You can think of a really easy example, which would be your extension strip, your multi-outlet extension strip. There are times that we've taken over projects and we take the display down to add devices, and we're like, they put an extension strip in here. And it's like that device right there, that power device, that has a fuse in it. And when that fuse takes a hit, now the entire extension is blown and you have no idea that has happened. And your system's not working, your display's not working, the devices behind there are not working, versus putting in a proper power controller that has a relay, and that relay is going to trip and not allow the devices to get blown up, and then it's going to be able to flip back on so your devices continue to work
remotely.
Yeah. And it's a very simple thing. I can't tell you how many times we see power devices that are inexpensive be the root cause versus the appropriate PDU, power distribution unit, or something to that effect. Same thing's true with commercial displays versus consumer displays. Commercial displays are literally designed to run for 16 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Minimum 12 hours a day.
Yeah. They're designed that way. And so the components used in those devices are designed for long-term use. Consumer grade devices are not designed that way, and that's how they keep those costs down.
Yeah, misnomer that people don't realize is that a residential television is only intended to be used for 2 hours a day, right? That's the average. Now, we all use them for a little longer than that at times, and maybe we have it 3 or 4 hours a day, but if you have it on every single day from 7 o'clock till 6 o'clock at night, that's going to be the end of the fails, right? I look at it as well, I don't mean to cut you off, but I look at it as well as these are all like little Achilles heel pieces, right? You've got like you mentioned, your power, your PDU, right? You've got, let's say you put a really junky network switch in. That's your failure point, right? You put in the wrong television. That's your failure point. Like, our goal and our job is reliability, consistency, keeping things up and running, and knowing that when you need to use it, the system works and it works well.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, another really good example is when someone says, hey, can't we just slap an Apple TV behind the display?
Yeah.
And then I can stream my laptop to it? Yes. Could you technically do that? Yeah. And then as soon as there's a software update to the Apple TV and that's no longer working, or if you have a device that's not compatible with an Apple TV, or there's so many different solutions like that. And so it's not designed for the whole picture in mind. It's designed for a very specific use case in someone's home, not for a use case in a business.
Yeah.
And so we're often thinking about that way in advance, and that's part of our engineering, part of our design. And yes, does that come with a cost? Sure, but it also comes with the relief that when you walk into your meeting at 12 o'clock or whatever time your meeting's about to start, things actually work.
Yeah, I mean, I like to look at it this way. There's so many inexpensive things that you can buy as you travel down that technology labyrinth of Amazon, and you get these things. I go, wow, this Balun is so inexpensive. This network, hub, this camera from China, and one thing that I think is common to many of them is there's not much, if any at all, maintenance on the firmware and on maintaining those devices. Whereas with Profound Technologies, as your technology partner, we're curating a list of devices and platforms that we know will be there and be able to be maintained. So the moment you buy something, through that, Amazon binge where you're trying to buy technology really inexpensively, you take on a risk to your system.
And you're not losing the Coca-Cola recipe on the black web.
Right.
The dark web.
And then you're gonna get hacked.
And it's all about the risk profile. And we try to avoid that on your behalf.
There is times that we've used consumer products. For example, if you're in an application where we cannot get a wire to the touch or to the table for a touch panel, we will use an iPad. However, with that, we will install some software that basically locks that down, allows it to be remotely managed, and makes it so that it can be trackable in the event that it gets stolen. There's a number of things that we put on there to make sure it's reliable, because the last thing, think about that scenario. You've got an iPad. If we're putting an iPad in your system, and somebody accidentally closes the app down, all of a sudden you're confused now and you don't know how to get back to it. So we lock that down so that it's actually something that is always available and it's always going to work and always going to fire every single time you need it to work.